Meta Perspective Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Meta Perspective Podcast. We're your hosts, Alex,
Evan,
and the girl. This is the show where we talk about deep and interesting topics and try to get to the heart of the idea through multiple perspectives.
But if you are joining us for the first time, please give the channel a follow and the video a like. We plan to do random giveaways and things like that in the future, so it doesn't hurt to stay active.
Speaking of staying active, don't forget to jump in that chat because we want to hear future topic ideas you have, just creative little witty things. We don't care. Most importantly, we want you in this conversation with us because Meta Perspective Podcast isn't meta
without your perspective.
Woo! Nailed it.
But yeah, guys, we have the chat pulled up here. So if you are joining us live during the show, you can chat. It's not going to be shown on the screen or anything. Help drive the conversation. If you're watching it in post, leave a comment. We'll respond to it. So in the future, we want to get this as engaging as possible. So the things we talk about live on the show, you guys can kind of give your input and give us something to dive in, because we do this every week, every Wednesday, and we got infinite things to talk about. We do a lot of talking outside of this, so yeah, it's fun to spice it up, and we want to hear from you guys. So we're also working on some clips that should be hitting the channel soon. We're going to do some uploads of the content from the last 2 years with edits and all that. So stay tuned for that. But if you are joining us tonight, we are continuing our spirit series. It's kind of taking legs of its own now. I think we're on episode 14. The first 2 series were like 4 episodes, 4 to 5 or so. So this is just becoming a reoccurring theme. We might.
Yeah, who would have thought doing a spirit series would cause some kind of spiritual reaction?
Well, it's interesting stuff, and there's a lot to talk about, and that's what we're good at doing. So tonight we are going to continue that conversation by talking about creation. Creation, Genesis, evolution, all of these concepts based around the idea of life and everything in our reality that we experience. Did it come from a higher power? Did it come out of nothing? Is it somewhere in between? We're going to kind of explore those types of things. And, it's, I have very limited knowledge of Genesis, but I have read it at one point, and I kind of get the gist of it. But, that's kind of, well, actually, that's probably a good place to start. So, the whole creation story and creationist theory and all that comes from the one book of the Bible. It's the beginning. It's Genesis. And it's really not that much of the Bible if you look at total volume, but it's a lot. It's a really big event described in a very short way. And, there's questions about, how people interpreted it back in the day. Like, people kind of believed the earth was flat. And so there's kind of a, it's a decode. It's a code. And, as far as I'm concerned, you can look at the code in different ways and you're not wrong. I don't think that, other than being someone who is atheist or agnostic and just rejecting the idea completely, I think, you could take it literally, you could take it metaphorically, you could even not even really buy into it at all, and it doesn't take away from the rest of, the Word of God or the teachings or the important beneficial stuff. Also, I'm a little sick, by the way. I sound a little nasally, but so
We'll
bear
fix
with
it in
me.
post.
Yeah. So yeah,
Remove hay fever.
basically, in a few paragraphs, it's described that God creates the heavens and the earth, the animals, the plants one day, and the animals the other day, and humans are like last, on the 7th day. That's where we get our 7th-day week. So it's a lot of it's baked in culturally, I think. But I guess, not the problem that I have with it, but the way that it describes, God creating things, like I was saying, you could take it literally, or you can kind of extrapolate that based on what we know now in modern science and technology. And kind of, I think the best ground is somewhere in between. I think the idea of DNA and genetics and this whole process that starts life and, reproduction and, expansion, that's totally in line with a creator's will. That could even be the God chemicals is the DNA. That's what makes it all go. So, I think that it doesn't necessarily say that creation is wrong, but I like to think that it's part of it.
I mean, there's definitely, if we're going to go the interpretation route, you go into like the earth being created in 7 days. A lot of people say, well, that's, it's like a reference point of time that's separate from us. God being outside of time, it would work different in this world. We would call it a day, but then it was, then a day was a longer thing. You look at people, it's like, that's why it said they were hundreds of years old. It's like time was, these are metaphors for things.
Yeah.
Not that you can necessarily find a pattern that makes sense to what science says the age of the earth is and everything. You can't necessarily find a pattern through that says like, okay, so in the first, 700 million years of the earth you got this, and the next 700 you got this, and it's like there's nothing you can really fit together where you could go to the other parts and fit them in and be like, oh,
right. It's not like a 7-day, integral of time that lines up perfectly.
Yeah, and if we're going off the interpretation aspect, then it's like, well, that to me, that would be evolution. Like, okay, things over time became the like. If we're talking about
it's not like humans day one.
Yeah, if we're talking about if we believe the Big Bang Theory, then there was an explosion. Over time, things fell into place, and as everything fell into place, things started to happen and form, and as things settled and formed, it inevitably created humans, almost as if, through the metaphor theory, you would have God kind of just blowing out stardust, and then it just all kind of fixes to a point in time that was all precise. It was all intentional, so that when things fell into place, okay, this is what I intended. It, for me, it was 7 days.
Right.
That would be like the metaphor.
To me, it's like, it's a pretty fucking big deal. It's at least to God. As far as it's described in the text, God cares about, this is his one project. Like, he doesn't have another universe with other humans. It's like, he's like focused on both. Like, he had twins or something like that, like this is a single parent or a single child, single parent situation, like this is, and I think it's interesting because the beginning, it's like God created the heavens and the earth. Well, to me, that's like the separation. That's the polarity that drives what's next, because, you're laying down the framework, right? Like, not necessarily even the Big Bang, but just like, in order for something to exist, it has to have a stage. So you set the stage, and then you create like the planets in the universe and like the material world. Because first it's like, if it was all created out of nothing and nothing like this existed before, it's like, work out the fundamental laws of physics and antimatter and all this stuff.
I mean, again, the metaphor, the metaphor theory is kind of going off of our interpretation and understanding of life. So if God is outside of time, outside of reality, outside of all of this, then it's hard to really compare our understanding of how he did it.
Yeah.
So using the metaphor theory, the way you compare is like if you're going to build something, first you need a table. You need you need an idea of a place to do it. Then you need to understand the materials that it's going to take to do it. Then you need to understand the methods and the cuts, the angles, everything that'll allow everything to fit together properly.
Yeah.
So there is like a process of understanding, I mean, that's the idea of creation is you would think that something outside, if we're going to the metaphors theory, then it's like I'm going to need a place, which is going to be this space, this time, this. And
Yeah,
then
set
I'm
the
going to need
parameters.
materials. So we're going to do DNA. We're going to do this. We're going to do all of these different things.
Yeah.
We're going to do elements.
Atoms. Yeah.
And
So
and then there's the time where you start building, and then when you're finished with the product.
right, and I think like to me, what creation means and the time frame is that progression, because it's like, I'm not even like, I like the Big Bang Theory. I think it actually ties in with creation because it was all, it all started, and in a way, I think, according to the Bible, I guess God's all knowing. He kind of knows how it plays out. Well, that's part of the creative element. If you're a 12th dimensional consciousness, like, it's just like looking at your reflection. You already know what's happening, but the fact that it exists, like you have a period where it can exist, and so it does. So like, if you created something from the start, knowing where it's going to end up, it's going to develop, right? It's like a baby. It's like, goo goo gaga. Now I got to grow up and turn into a teenager and all this stuff. So it's like, the parameters were there. And the interesting thing too, it's like God created this massive, expansive universe with all these nebulas and solar systems and, all this stuff in it. But then he focused on one little tiny speck, which is Earth and humans. So it's like, while that does sound a little ridiculous to me in the grand scheme of things, if you created something and was watching it unfold and then found the exact perfect thing that you're looking for, the best one out of all this billions of stars and planets and all that, well, you picked that one. So that's day 2. You know what I mean? So like, to me, this makes sense of like progression, not in days, but in like eons or epochs or something, like the period of, creating the universe and the laws of physics and reality. And then it's like, all right, now you're forming the earth and all this stuff. And so it's like,
like writing a
Right.
better analogy would be like a computer code than a table and making a birdhouse or something. But like, you're writing the code, it's like you have the computer, you pick the computer that can run all of this simulation.
Yeah.
Then you come up with the code, how it's all going to work, all this stuff, and then you create the code. Now I need to find the location within the code
Yeah.
that I want to start from.
Run the
Because
program.
now that I've created the program, now I need a place to start. It's like The Sims. I can turn the game on, but it's like, here's your property. Okay, well, I got to pick a spot to start building my home.
Loading.
Yeah, it's like, this is the area I'm going to do, So, yeah.
No, I mean, yeah. So like, so he created this thing, found the earth, and now, and it says that he created the plants and then the animals, and it's not humans day 1, and that's kind of like, to me, what points to, in parallel to evolution, is that before you had hardcore animals, you had to have, like bacteria and plant life and stuff that evolves in a primitive way. You could say evolved, like I think it's like people consider it and conceptualize it in this way, and maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't make sense to me. It's like, oh, first God created the plants, and the plants just poofed out of nowhere, and then the animals just poofed out of nowhere. It's like look a little past the specific words. Like, if you just consider that, like, it's obvious that you can make an argument against carbon dating and all that, but like, there's a progression where you have, fossils in pieces of rock that we can tie to geological events and all that. It's like we see what kind of creatures were alive then. And it's not a matter of dating it. It's like this was before that, because now you don't see that anymore. So it's like there was something before. It wasn't just put there as a clue. You know what I mean? Like some people kind of believe it that way, I think. But to me, it's like, if you don't take it so literally, it makes a lot more sense. Where it's really just describing the progression of life. That first you had to have plants in order to have animals. And now that you have animals, now you can have people, because there's an ecosystem now. They can depend on it. They can become part of it. So it's one step higher each time. And I think that's the real message, instead of trying to say that evolution isn't real or something like that. It's beside the point. It's that all this stuff was created to develop and progress a certain way. And I think that's the real meaning of that very small paragraph.
I mean, obviously it's, that's the thing with the Bible is, when you read it, I believe it is kind of a transformative thing. Like it's something, like I believe when they say like the Bible is the only book you can read with the author, that the book itself kind of comes alive. If you are reading it and you want to understand it, it's almost as if the book you will read it and interpret it the way that it's intended. Versus reading it and trying to compare what you read to what you know. Instead, you read with the intention of trying to of it revealing itself to you.
Yeah.
So the idea of God being outside of time, outside of space, he's omnipresent. He's everything. With that understanding, the belief, if you're going to go by the creationist theory of, God just created us, if you're going by that theory, there's also stuff that backs that up as well.
Yeah.
Which is why if we're talking about something that's outside of space and time that we cannot comprehend, then it's hard to say that it's not that it's hard to just rule it out as just a crazy thing. If people back in the day were like, it was 6,000 years, you're like, these people don't know anything. It's like, I don't know. That's a specific number. I mean, they could have, if they're stupid, they would say it was a really, really, really long time ago.
Yeah.
They wouldn't say it was 6,000 years ago. If you're going by the creationist, theory, then we're going off of the firmament. If there's a firmament, then you have to question, well, what is space outside of this? What is it? Is it in a sense almost kind of like a type of static, outside of this? Is it really there's extra planetary, all this stuff, or are we something different than what we're seeing in space?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, again, we don't know. All we know is what we've been told and what we were taught in school, and we believe that. But there's also that other side that has validity. If we're going off of a firmament, if we're going off of 6,000 years, it says, okay, it took 7 days. Earth, right, was created 6,000 years ago from right now.
Yeah.
If you look at that, it's interesting because there is also math that adds up to it being two people and reproducing and multiplying. The math would add up for how long they lived and all that stuff. It would add up to about 8 billion people now. And there's a lot of different people who have gone over that and been like, I mean, technically the math adds up for how many people we have now.
Yeah.
If we started as we did,
yeah,
then the math adds up. If there's a firmament, then this whole reality and the way that we've been perceiving it is wrong. And the way we understand it is wrong. If that aspect is true, then we've been lied to and we've been put in this little cage looking at the everything is just this physical simplicity when it's actually much more complex and layered within different dimensions, and like a firmament is like part of this barrier between another spiritual realm. It's like, again, we don't know
Yeah.
because we've never done this stuff.
Yeah.
All we have to go off of is, videos we see, from NASA and stuff, which, I mean, they are pretty regularly enough caught editing videos and editing photos.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's one of those things, again, if there's no validity to this, then how come the place we rely on our space photos, how come they edit all these photos? Why is there's so much conspiracy around us not going to the moon? It's like, there's a lot of stuff where, again, it just leaves it open to be like, well, we don't really know. When we go off of like the science of it, a lot of it is like what we're being told. When you look at a lot of the carbon dating, it's like a lot of the stuff, there's people who are like, hey, a lot of these things, the carbon wouldn't be here still if it was this long ago.
Yeah.
But it would still be here if it was like 6,000 years ago. And it starts to bring those things back up where it's like a lot of the science is saying this, but a lot of the scientists are saying other things. And there's science all over, but nothing concrete enough to say, well, this is proof that evolution happened, that nothing became something, that non-life became life. If there's no proof of that, then we are just kind of putting faith into this idea that we're being told, that people say, well, we have evidence that all this stuff makes sense. And you're like, well, okay, that makes sense to me the way you explained it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so does all of this being super crazy, because I'm a human being in a body that can fly on an airplane and watch movies. The fact
Right.
that this reality exists by itself is just absurd.
Well, we're definitely detached from nature now.
The fact that there's rocks and stuff and then life forms on a planet, and now we sit there and watch Netflix and eat charcuterie. It's like,
Yeah.
that in itself is just an absurd reality to even potentially exist.
Yeah.
So it's
I
like, it's hard to rule out crazy when existence itself is kind of crazy.
I mean, I've heard that. I've heard those arguments, and I just personally, I just think it sells the whole concept of it all short. I mean, are you sure it wasn't 60,000 years? Is it supposed to be 6,000 years or something? I mean, it just seems like, I don't know.
There's a lot of different times people talk about 6,000. I think is one of the more popular.
So I feel like people take the creationist idea, and they create a box, and then they try to put stuff into the box instead of taking the creationist idea as a lens and then looking at reality. And I think, to me, it just makes sense.
I mean, originally they said we came from monkeys. And then a lot of science was like, well, that's not true. It's actually this other animal. And it's like, but monkeys look very similar to us. Yeah, but actually we're much closer to like a bird or something, or a chicken or a cockroach. And you're like, it's just this confusing thing of it keeps switching to where there's the monkey thing kind of made sense because our physical basic monkey brains go, but that looks similar.
Yeah.
Look at, he's got ears and he's using a stick. He likes a tire rope. I like tire rope swing.
Yeah. I mean, we can,
It's like,
we've dug up.
it's easy, like
bodies of-
association of like, I can kind of see myself in that. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if then it changes and it's like, well, actually it's this, it gets to a point where it's like, but we all believed it was that. Like all of us were like, that makes sense. The missing link, it starts here and it goes here. It's like, oh, never mind. That was wrong. And then it's like, there's just so much around it that it gets to a point where you can't definitively say that one's wrong and one's right, because the science is lacking in anything concrete that can pull all of these things together and make it all make sense together.
Yeah.
While the other side goes against everything that we've been taught and we know, that to me, that's the hardest thing, is to sit there and say, well, is the way I view all of creation and this reality, is it wrong? That's a pretty big leap.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very, you got to be very courageous to be like, let me tackle this one, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's why I think, that's why I said about people putting it in a box. But in the same way that we talked about earlier, like if you created the universe and then just wait, like, this is that quantum existence where you create something and you already know how it ends because you're outside of our linear way of understanding the world and time. So, you create something just to have it exist and to play out, like nothing else, unless, unless you do that, there's literally nothing. So something has to happen. There has to be a fold somewhere where stuff happens. So, like the same way that you create something and then you wait for the earth to develop, where now you can develop it further. I think the same thing about humans, like if you combine the evolution concept, God was just waiting for his creation to get to the point where he knew what the point was going to be, the first human. For whatever reason this happened. Maybe it was just created out of thin air because he only created one and then made a second one. But it's like, whether that happened literally at one point and it poofed into existence, or it was the time where now the earth's ready for development. Now the life that's been created and harvested on this earth is ready to be called a human. Now I intervene. Now I step in. And now I get to see my creation and try to guide it in the way that I want. So that's kind of how I see it, where it's not like, because, we dig up Neanderthals and Homo habilis and, erectus and all these other like variations of humans, and we can tell that they're different physiologically. Maybe it doesn't mean they're not necessarily humans, but it's not like I don't think one idea is calling the other idea wrong. I just wish people could try to find a way to rationalize them together to where now it actually makes a lot more sense any way that you look at it.
And that's why we want you guys in the chat. But no, it's that's, I mean, and I mean, again, everything kind of makes sense. It's if you're looking at the science, but you're also looking at like another idea of what you don't know, it's like, well, this is a whole nother perspective.
Yeah.
That's like, again, there's not enough of either for anybody to sit down and be like, oh, we know the answer.
Right.
But
and from what I've seen in the Bible, there's nothing that disproves.
But as
the
far
other.
as far as the box, like if we're going from the other side,
Yeah.
it is a simpler side. The simpler side is God created all of this so that he could intercede into us and escape kind of the endlessness of what is God, to be a part of us, separate from us, so that God can experience a finite life, and experience all these emotions, all this stuff is genuine. And so if you're looking from that perspective, if I'm building a habitat and I want to build like a terrarium that has its own ecosystem, I could do that in 7 days. If I'm the builder and I'm putting this together,
Yeah.
I could do that in 7 days, and I could add what I need to add in, the right bugs and the right this. I've already got the heat right, and now I've got the humidity right. Now, within 7 days, now I add these things,
Yeah.
now I add this. And so from the idea of the builder, the idea of 7 days to create all of this could be a real thing. If you're looking at from our perspective to a terrarium, in that terrarium, they're sitting there like, this is life, this is reality.
Yeah.
And it's like, they built this in 7 days. I like the first things in here, they lived long until things in this experiment he's doing went wrong. But like, I know the people from the beginning, they said it was 7 days he built this. They watched from the cage and they were just put in. And it's like, well, that's crazy. But from the idea of the builder, it's like, well, it's crazy in your reality. So if we're going from that perspective, that this is just supposed to be almost like a vacation spot for God, then the idea of the experiment going wrong, getting sabotaged by the devil, would be almost pushing us. I mean, if you're the devil, you're going to say, hey, it's not a vacation spot for God. This is for you guys. You guys do what you want to do with your free will and just start building stuff. Get crazy. Try to get out of this. Try to warp the time. Try to, get off of this planet. Try to do all of these things that go against your instincts to just survive and work together. Instead, make this about you.
Yeah.
Internalize this yourself and just do what you want to do. Don't let God trap you in this place. Do what you want to do. You're a free soul. Do what you want to do. And so if you look at it from that perspective, then you would, over that time, you would have a group that's like, hey, don't look at the truth. This is how things work. You guys just need to do things the way you want to do things, because it's the exact same lie. Eat the apple. Do what you want to do. Build this stuff. Do what you want to do, because there is no God. There is no anything. It's all just it's you and however you want to interpret everything, because everything's interpretable.
Yeah.
Well, it's the game of telephone at this point. If people can't reconnect with God, then all you have to go off of is what you're being told. So then from that point, it's like, you could say it's equally crazy for me to just be raised by people I don't know who have taught me everything about this reality that I've learned a lot of it was wrong, that I was taught in government public schools. Like, this is what the kids need to know. But that's not true. It's verifiably false, and you knew that before you taught it to me.
Well,
Things like
yeah.
that where you just get confused and you're like, there is distrust behind the stuff that I was raised with knowing.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to just be like, I agree with anything concretely if you don't have some proof for it. Especially for me, having an experience with God, it's like, well, I know one thing's true. God is true. Now, is everybody's interpretation, for thousands of years of what all of this means, is that true?
Yeah.
It's like, but I
Well,
do know right now
I
I'm being lied to some degree.
I think
So
this,
it definitely raises questions on all of it.
well, I think it's also a sticky kind of lie or social norm that has a lot of history. Like when Copernicus or whatever declared that, that we revolve around the sun. It's like, that's the kind of stuff that would get you killed back then. So you had a lot of people that were just, didn't want to hear anything to that sort. And, it's not, I think that's what I'm hung up about. Like, why are people fighting about if one disproves the other?
Well,
Like, it doesn't necessarily.
if you have a group that's like, we need to distort reality, then that's why you would be pushing stuff. If everybody's like, we know how things happened, don't let these people ruin your mind. And people are like, no, I know the truth, and we're going to push it. Even though I could get killed for this, I'm going to fight for it. It's stuff like that to me throughout history is always, when it comes to science, has always been a weird thing when people are like, even though we all agree on this, I decided I didn't agree with that's like me growing up with being told that evolution is real. And then on my own deciding that doesn't make sense. I'm going to do research and I'm going to prove something otherwise. In one lifetime by yourself, when everybody else sees it another way, doesn't that sound crazy? Like, it almost sounds like everybody's like, hey, don't believe this lie. Don't let this lie spread. We don't want people contaminating things with lies, because it distorts the reality. And all these people are trying to reframe stuff, just like they're trying to reframe the money market and create banking systems and debt. These same people who've been creating debt for thousands of years, you could say, could easily sit there and be like, we're going to also recreate reality,
But
so that you focus on the simplicity and you don't see, basically dumb you down to where you only focus on you and what you want.
Right.
So then the money is now a thing, the debt is a thing, because if you see outside of that, suddenly all this debt and all this stuff, we're the enemies, and you can see that we have bad intention.
Well, see, then that works. It works the same way too. Is that the religious side was used as a weapon against, maybe the scientific side, like proposing that the Earth revolves around the sun, and then the interpretation of the Bible is like, oh no, that's wrong, that's blasphemous or whatever. It's like, well, it's right. So the people that are trying to control us with their science and their explanations, and then the people that were trying to suppress any type of forward thinking in that regard and control us with the religion. It's two sides of the same exact control coin.
Yeah, you
You know,
don't
what I'm saying
know
is
which one's
that
right or which
it
one's
doesn't
wrong.
matter about the control. Like, we can just see it. Like, and I guess, to me, so I'm an engineer, and I've taken some geology courses and stuff like that. And geologists are probably the smartest form of engineering. I think they're even smarter than physicists and, astro whatever. Like, geologists are fucking smart. And, as far as I can tell, like, a lot of the shit's legit. Like, you can make an argument for carbon dating and all that, but when you can, like, measure the contents of rock here and it matches up with here and the global shift and how long it would take and all that, like,
But if you're
it starts to really
but
make sense.
but this is my whole thing. If you're at that level to where everything you learned, it's a niche market, but it's so complex, only a group kind of get it, but they're all taught by the same kind of people. Even if it is all legit, what's to stop me from bribing you to prove something otherwise? Nobody would be, if you can use what you know to prove even an aspect of this being right. I have people on payroll who will support your paper. We'll get you published. We'll give you a Nobel Peace Prize.
All right, but then
What's to stop me from just
practice.
bribing? But again, if not think nowadays, you said back in the day, if you come out and you say the Earth's revolving around the sun, people are like, that'll get you killed. Nowadays, if you come out and you say anything different, your career is threatened. And it's been like that for a long time, where if you're a doctor and you're like, I have a different theory on this, they're like, ooh, you might not be a doctor anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, so there is a fear to even argue something that goes outside of the structure we've been told. So there's an argument there as well that the same fear used back then is used now, but in a reversed manner.
But it's like, if
Almost
a geologist
supporting.
is like, according to the way that this developed over the last several million years, when we drill down, we should hit, this layer at about this depth. And then they do. So it's like, either it was all set up as an elaborate plan by God to, like, convince us that it's not real, which doesn't make sense. Or it was, it's like, it's actually real. And all the interpretations of Genesis and creation are built around this idea that if you say that anything is other than the legitimate or the like literal definition of what's said, then it's totally wrong or something like that. And I think that's like, it's so limiting. Why would you confine the existence of God into that argument? Because
Well,
you
my
could argue
whole
it
thing
either
is,
way. Like,
my whole thing is,
does it really matter
if it were true that the creationist theory, if that were true, then it would matter for the existence of us and why we're here.
But
You
why
know,
does
we're not here
why does
for our
everything that
own
we
thing.
see say that the Earth is 3.6 billion years old?
Well, I mean, because that's what we're being told and what people say they agree on.
But
There are people
it's
who are
how-
saying the opposite, and those people are not credited, but they were before they got into the
but
field.
it's testable, repeatable stuff. I mean,
By the
it
people
is.
testing and repeating. But it's again, it's above our heads for us to be able to say that what they're saying is true is actually true. If I'm giving you, for example, they say 2,000 years ago there was a major flood that went over the entire planet. That would create a lot of sediment. There's arguments, about crustacean, coral, stuff like that, fossilized being found on top of mountains.
Yeah.
So if this did, if stuff like this happened,
Yeah.
even every few thousand years, then there's no telling that things would get covered up. I mean, you look at your own house; it doesn't take long before you see like a layer of dust. 1,000 years, you don't know what could actually happen to cover for things to get covered.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. It's like you can measure layers of dust and the contents of those dust, not the carbon dating or anything, just the chemical contents of those layers of dust, and confirm it with early humans' records of volcanic activity or certain events and be like, oh, well, just so happens that 300 years later is this event that they write about here, and we can confirm that. It's like,
But again,
to
like
me,
you
it's
said,
very compelling.
but then you hear the arguments about carbon dating. And those arguments could derail the entire structure of that. But the problem is, because that's not credited and it doesn't fit the model, those people are discredited.
But-
and
but-
now
right.
you lose your license.
But carbon dating is not
But if it's
not
the
the
truth,
end all be all.
but if it's the truth, then why is it so strict? And I'm not just talking about science. In almost
Yeah.
any area of field, whether you're a doctor, even a dentist, when you go against what we're being told is right,
Yeah.
there is backlash and they try to shut you down. If it's the truth, why are you fighting me to say, oh, he said something different? You cannot trust him. It's like, but that's what science is. Science is asking those questions. If we do not have proof, no proof of non-life creates life, then we don't have proof of us starting from something. And there could be, and because of the lack of proof, now we open up that conversation of, what about the creationist theory? My whole thing is, when we look at this and we say, well, wait, we don't have proof here, can we talk about this? No, because your reputation will be destroyed and you'll lose your career. It's
No,
like,
I get all that.
but I'm just saying, there is a good argument back in the day for being like, why would you go after people who are trying to change the way you're thinking? But there's also an argument now to say, why is there such a repercussion for anybody talking about anything that goes outside of the norm? It's like, again, it's
But-
the same argument directed
but-
to the same people.
It's also the same. It goes both ways too, because if you go outside the norm biblically in the past and you were right, then you were reprimanded. It's the same thing now. So like,
But think about the
What's
the
the difference?
repercussion
It's
of that defined.
what you're
Truth.
talking about is humans manipulating humans, but it doesn't take the fact away from the fact that this all seems to have been here for a very long time and developed a certain way, and it's verifiable evidence that is true, and it doesn't disprove what's said in the Bible. It actually, I think, it proves it, or at least matches up. There's no linchpin in the description from the Bible, unless you take it 100% literally to the letter, which is also translated. Like the meanings of these terms are. This is the beginning of Genesis.
they had
more like a poem.
legitimate
It's more. It's written
definitions.
more like a poem, or something that is so non-descriptive, but also propositional. It says all of these claims in a way that could be interpreted, and there's no real missing thing that says, unless this is true, everything else about the Bible is false.
Yeah, again, so my whole thing is, in the past, I mean, we don't have a ton of stuff of like all these cultures threatening to kill people for going against the Bible. That in itself goes against the Bible. For me to say I'm a Christian, if you're telling me that the creationist theory might not be right, then I'll kill you. That's historically not really been an accurate Christian detail.
Oh, that is
So
the Copernicus example. The Pope or whatever, the church was mad that he was coming out with these ideas, and he got in a lot of trouble. He was a big figure, but he could.
There's also
killed.
things to be said about the Catholic faith, when it comes to when
Right,
we're
and that's what I'm
arguing a
saying. The
Christian.
same manipulation that you're talking about now could have been back then for the other side.
But basically what I'm saying is, it's the repercussion of truth. If I tell people that there could, that things are this way and that and blah, 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 what conclusion Christians come to? The same as you, which is, well, all this really does is show the detail and design behind how all of it worked.
Yeah.
But what's the repercussion for me saying, hey, maybe the dates for this stuff aren't accurate? I get, I mean, my entire career destroyed, because what is the repercussion of that truth if it's true? If it's true,
Then
the
it's all- then it's
repercussion
all
is
simulation.
this entire system we have is a lie, and we're basically being manipulated.
It's Truman Show.
And we're being it that, but that would be, again,
Yeah.
that would be a reason for me to discredit you and say that's not what the other scientists agree on. I have people, good scientists, the best paid scientists, they all have Nobel Peace Prizes. I have an army of scientists that are the best, that are all honest and genuine.
Yeah.
I mean, I pay them all. They're on my salary, and they all agree with this concept. But so again, if you create the structure, and you see how dumb people basically are, you follow these people are super intelligent in their field, but they're people just like us who went to school, and then they were trained and taught what they were trained and taught, and they interpret things the way they were trained and taught to interpret things.
But it's repeatable, like the idea of
through
gravity
the
and
system that we were all taught.
Like if you drop a ball and stuff, you can measure the acceleration of gravity. Like it's measurable, it's repeatable. You don't have to know it. You could be told it, and then you could try it yourself, and it works. And that's what I'm talking about with a lot of this geology stuff. Is it's repeatable where, based on my calculations that have been developed over the past few hundred years of human research and intuition, I think that this layer should be about over here, this deep. And it is. So it's like, it's not saying that it's all
But what if there were just
wrong.
for sake of argument, like let's say, 4,000 years ago, let's say at the beginning of humanity, we had 2,000 years of dinosaurs. Sounds crazy. Not many people, but we had the dinosaurs and all that. Garden of Eden, everything else is wild. This is just an argument. Again, I'm not really taking either side, because there's, I was raised in the physical world. So it's hard for me to look at the other side and just be like, yeah, 7 days makes sense. It's like, that sounds crazy to me. That's really fast. But you could build a terrarium in that time.
Yeah.
So it's like, maybe it's beyond me. I don't know. It's either this is something that's the way it is, that's beyond my understanding, or there is a way to understand it. Those are two very hard paths to choose. It's like, do you want to go to get free money, or do you want to go to get, free happiness? You're like, well, I want to be happy. I also want to play with money, but I can only choose one. It's like, well, I can be happy.
And that's my problem with the creationist.
That's a bad analogy, but
the creationist hardballers is that they tell you that, this is how you have to think about it. Sorry, the allergies are bad. So yeah, people will tell you how to think about it, like on the creationist side, like, we can't prove any of these things. You should look at it this way, and this is how it is. It can't be disproven. It's like, well, but it kind of can. Like,
so like I said,
so like you're kind of using an angle. You're working an angle that God is real, and I agree with that angle. I agree that God is real, but I'm not going to get hung up on this the same way that I didn't get hung up on the earth. The sun revolves around the earth. Like, maybe it doesn't matter and God still created it all. Can we all just agree on that?
And I totally,
100%.
I see that. I mean, it's one of those things that's a weird hill to die on.
Right, exactly. I don't know why people die.
It's like the Christian Bible, the heart of it is Jesus died for our sins. Spread that word. Right. And you're like, it was 7 days. And you're like, that's right. Has nothing to do with Jesus. Like,
you're putting your whole faith on if this is true or not.
If there's going to be a hill,
if
there's going to be a hill you die on, it's the one that Jesus died on. It's the one his disciples died on. It's the whole metaphor of like, this is all about you standing up for something, and that's the hill you die on.
All
and you're
that
like,
was very real and confirmable. And
and you read that and you're like, yep, 7 days. It's like, that's a crazy
to
thing focus on.
Don't discredit everything else that's like.
And 100% I see that. Although within reality, you're going to get everything. So you're going to get the people whose brains work like, I'm obsessed with the Bible, but everybody's talking about this stuff. I get that. I need to push this.
Yeah.
You're going to get a little bit of everything. You're going to get the people who are like, nobody's ever drawn, SpongeBob the underneath side of their desk at school. It's like you're good. Everything that can exist will exist.
See,
You're going to have everybody who says nobody's done this, so I will.
I've got a thought here that I want to get out. So I think the problem is that there's certain people that have the
Well,
mentality.
hold on. I want to say this real quick, only because again, there was no side to take, so there was no side to truly discredit.
Right. Right.
That's why it's like it's like the carbon stuff. Yes, it's very compelling. But my problem is the people who come out and say, actually, this is how the science works with carbon dating. And then they're like, that's not true. That's not how science works. You're destroyed. Go after him, destroy his career. And it's like,
yeah,
that's a weird response to somebody who would be wrong. Wouldn't you just say you're wrong?
Right. And
like, it's weird to take that specific focus in somebody if it's incorrect.
Yeah.
Like, that's the response of a guilty party that's like, shut him up. But all I want to say is, if we're going off of just a hypothetical, let's say the Earth is 6,000 years old. After 2,000 years, there was let's just say it's always a repeating flood. None of what I'm saying is backed up by anything. But if there's a flood after 2,000 years and the dinosaurs are buried under an absurd amount of sediment, and then 2,000 years later, you get another one. 2,000 years later, you get another one. Or no, it was those two. And now we're at that 2,000 year now. If we test the soil, we can say, well, when we go down this far, it's dinosaurs. But you could also argue that all that extra time that they're saying, like, well, this is how far you go down for this. But if you're going down millions of years, it's all the way down here. Well, maybe our time is thrown off because of this extra sediment that's not natural. So it's not like dust in your house. You walk in and you're like, wow, this place must have been abandoned for, 200 years by how much dust is gathered. But how do you know there wasn't some dust wave that came through the house? You're like, well, because that doesn't happen. But there's a lot of evidence that there was a great dust flood, But when you look at science is still skeptical. Like, I don't think there was a great flood. And it's like, well, every group of people around the world during that time all have records of a great flood.
Right. There's a big push in actual, geology that, like, Randall Carlson is a guy that's pushing this. He's more on the archaeology side and when these peoples existed, but like, I think that's definitely being challenged. I'm not disagreeing with the idea.
But that's what I'm saying is it's always been like, that's biblical. That's this, that's that. But all throughout like our lifetime, the records of a great flood in every culture historically during that period,
right?
The records of it have always been there.
Yeah,
they've always had the records, and there's plenty of evidence that kind of backs that up.
And it also coincides with
glaciers
and ice melting.
But until like the past 10 years,
yeah,
that's been a crazy theory.
Yeah.
Even though if you look at science backs it up. And right now it's finally getting more mainstream where they're like, hey guys, like it kind of seems like we're just believing a lie if we're going to ignore all of this evidence we now have, where real scientists went out and said, we're going to do our own stuff. We don't care that we're getting destroyed.
Yeah.
So that's my whole thing is when you see the carbon dating thing, I mean, for all we know, that could become another thing where people come out and they're like, we've actually gone crazy, drove ourselves crazy and taught ourselves to understand carbon dating.
Yeah.
And we can teach you how it works and explain it. And then, you see stuff like that where you're like, this is pretty compelling. And they're like, no, it's crazy. This is how it works. And you're like, oh yeah, because that's what I was taught. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, but I can't get rid of this feeling like what he's saying makes more sense in a way that I understand it. And not just like, no, it makes sense, but I just don't understand it because I'm not at that level. Because this is big game stuff. It's like, but if you can teach that guy, how come he's not able to teach me in a way that makes sense? If I ask you a question, a simple question, I don't know how this stuff works. How can you explain this? Because this is the conspiracy and it's confusing. And they go, well, that's just not how it works. And then they explain their way. And it's like, but I know your way. You're just not acknowledging. You're saying it doesn't work. You see that repeated so many times to the point where it's like, while the creationist theory seems crazy, the reason that I give validity to it is because of all the attack on anybody who questions what we're being told. It's not we're science. We're open to different things.
Right.
And if you're wrong, we can disprove you. It's don't try to disprove him. Shut him down. And
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
weird reaction I see everywhere, where if
I
you
mean-
can shut him down, if you can disprove him, just disprove him so we know the truth. But if you can't disprove him,
Yeah.
you would shut him down. That's how
look,
you would react.
Here's a perfect example of where I think people are missing the mark, where all this stuff ties together, right? You have science saying that there wasn't a huge flood. You have new archaeologists and geologists saying that now it is very likely that the melting of the glaciers and the ice caps after one of the ice ages caused a gigantic flood where all of this water was all of a sudden released from up above and it swept across the land, especially in the region that early humanity evolved from, like the Mesopotamian, super flat kind of desert. So if you got a shit ton of water, it's all gonna spread out. It's gonna cover the entire known world as far as you know. So that's what I'm saying is none of the theories actually disprove anything. So if we're being told that maybe it's not a flood, blah blah blah, maybe this is all caused by long-term erosion of the river instead of a giant gush. But it's like, the Bible says it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. If some geological event like an eruption or something like that caused these ice caps to melt, and then it spewed a lot of steam and water into the atmosphere, yeah, it would fucking rain for a month. It would rain everywhere before the water came, and then the flood came. And it's like, if you take it literally, we're like, oh, the entire world rained, and so the ocean level just went up everywhere, but the water came from nowhere. It's like, that sounds pretty disprovable. God's not real. But it's like, okay, well, if you actually just like think about it, and maybe that's part of it too. Maybe the scientists now don't want us to tie the Great Flood concept to the Bible because they've already tried to disprove God in their science. So there's an angle there. So, and I guess this is actually part of my closing here. And let me, sorry, sickness.
Gross.
So I think it does a real
6 feet.
disservice to kind of, like we were talking about earlier, the Christians that want to stand on this creationist hill and die on it and think that anything that disproves creation, like evolution or carbon dating or any of this stuff, means that it's not right. I think that that's a flawed way to think about it, because if you have a side, trying to unravel society, trying to teach us all that it's all science, it's all explainable, and God does not fit into that. And then you have the creationist side saying, oh no, it's all wrong, it was all created and all this stuff. And you have no one saying that maybe these things are tied together. Then, these kids that are growing up, they like learn about all this stuff and like, oh, well, I guess God isn't real because it disproves religion. But it's like, there's no one saying that like this science stuff is actually proving religion. It's proving the existence of God. And we all need to kind of open our minds to the fact that maybe we're both right. And we haven't understood things for a long time. And now that we're learning more and we have the technology to learn more, let's connect those things to the Bible. Because as far as I've seen, there's nothing in the Bible that disproves science, and there's nothing in science that disproves the Bible. They kind of go hand in hand, in my opinion. And I think that we're doing a disservice to people not teaching them that this science that they're learning could also be tied to creation. And I think it's the people that want to die on that hill that are saying, no, this is all wrong. The earth is 6,000 years old, according to the Bible, and I won't entertain anything else because it disproves what I believe. I don't think that's true. I don't think it disproves anything. I think we're getting the lens, and God is so complex, and we've been able to measure gravity with simple equations. The complexity of the earth and space is all explained in these simple mathematical formulas with very few variables and total relation to everything else. That points to a grand design to me. It has nothing to do with
Okay, so
is science right or science wrong.
Close. Keep going.
science is 100% right. And I think that the Bible is also 100% right. And, it's a verbal description and interpretation of what it means, to describe God and have somebody conceptualize God, which is a very complex thing that it's not easy to describe in a book and have it passed down through the ages where people understand it, no matter your level of education, no matter if you can read, you can hear the stories, you can relate to them. And the Bible is designed as a way to pass on the idea of God and should not be taken 100% literally, or it disproves the existence of God. And that's kind of my thought on the whole thing. Because I'm a science guy. Like, I like science. I learn about the way that the universe works all the time. And it's very, very interesting to me. And everything that I learn, it all points to a grand design. It all connects. And if you're trying to look for holes in the Bible or in science, then you have a motive, and you're clearly trying to dissuade people one way or the other. You're playing the role of good or evil. And even a Christian that's trying to disprove somebody or sway them is not capturing the full point of what I think this all really means. And that's that's my.
So for my closing, I'm going to be a little more generous to the creationists.
Yeah,
and
that's
I'm
fine.
going to say, if we didn't have these arguments, if we didn't have the people who focused on this, we may not have the people who are proving these great floods and things that were biblical.
Yeah.
And if we didn't have this challenging side, and people, if I didn't come out and say adamantly, like, it was 6,000 years, if I didn't say it adamantly, people wouldn't challenge to prove me wrong.
Yeah.
And if certain things that I'm adamant about the Bible, if there's certain things about the Bible that I'm adamant about, and you cannot just prove it and you have to attack me, to me, that speaks leagues too.
Yeah.
And
That's a good point.
So it does in itself reflect the point of the Bible, which is, free will. It's following Jesus. How can I get to know Jesus and get to know some living God that created me and get in touch with the very thing that gave me this life? How can I do that if I just believe in a basic, simple world and a structure that I've been told this is how it works? And the idea of something greater than this doing these magnificent things does not fit into this model.
Yeah.
So I do want to give them a shout out to the fact of just keeping people thinking, keeping people challenging ideas. If what we're being told is the way things work, then we, by basic logic, need to challenge that so that we know it's true.
Yeah.
There's so many things where a new generation touches information and either they prove something new. That's what science is. It's me saying, you came up with these calculations. Let me look at those and try to either prove or disprove them. And maybe I add to it because of my discoveries. We should be challenged. We should be encouraged to challenge these things. We shouldn't be attacked, and we shouldn't be, belittled for challenging what we've been told, because what we've learned, what we've been taught our whole lives is, from what we understand, is a result of things getting challenged.
Yeah.
So my closing is very simple. It's just think for yourself, challenge things. People are going to tell you a lot of stuff. You wouldn't get into a relationship and just be like, I believe everything they're saying. Eventually they're going to say something. You might challenge it, because I've been listening to you. It doesn't all make sense. You said this. Challenged. Yeah. Is this person telling me the truth? Well, why does that matter? Well, because I don't want to have these type of genuine emotions going into something to find out it was never reciprocated, and I've been getting kind of used for those emotions.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a logic behind why I would question things. You should do that with everything in your life. If you want to understand the truth, if you want to grow as a person, challenge what you know, question things and do it for yourself,
Yeah.
say, I want to know the truth and just question it yourself. Don't just believe everything you hear. Even if it makes sense, try to understand why it makes sense. Just
And
work to be smart. It's fun.
to a quick thought to go off of that and to end it all, take that challenging mentality and approach it from a connective mindset. Try to connect the dots as opposed to, draw X's or circles around certain dots. Like the greatest, trick that evil can play on you is to make you believe that God and everything is all not real because science disproves it. Well, you could also have this perspective that science actually proves it all and totally matches up with everything. And, I would want you to be open to that idea as well. And definitely challenge the things that you're told, because I think that's the main point of what you're saying is that, it's always been a spin.
No, you
So-
could blindly listen to us, or you could sit there and say, wow, Evan made a lot of sense on that last thing. But is it true? Let me do my own research. If it sticks out to you, if it's something you're actually interested in, if you're going to build your frame of reality around it, like question if the stuff you're putting in your head and the lenses you're looking through are the right lenses.
Yeah.
There might be a better pair of glasses out there. You make you see a little clearer. You drive a little straighter. Your life gets a little better. There's no reason to go through life with just what people tell you is your prescription. Find out for yourself.
And have for yourself. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining us. Join us every day or every Wednesday live. Join the chat. And if you're watching us in post, leave a comment. Let us know what you think. And we'll see you next week.
Until then, Meta Perspective out.
Meta Perspective Podcast.